Rome didn't conquer the ancient world with magic. It did it with iron discipline, endless roads, brilliant engineering, and an organization so ruthless it outlasted almost every enemy it faced. Now imagine giving that machine an actual machine gun, not a better sword, not a stronger ballista, a weapon that spits hundreds of rounds per minute, a weapon so alien to the ancient world that to Rome's enemies, it wouldn't feel like superior technology. It would feel like the wrath of the gods. And here's what makes this scenario truly terrifying. Rome was already the most efficient military state of its time. Julius Caesar carved out Gaul and shattered the old republic. But it was Augustus who turned that chaos into a stable empire. 28 permanent legions, a professional standing army of roughly 300,000 men, including auxiliaries, military roads, frontier forts, and a system built to last centuries. So what if that Rome, not some chaotic kingdom, but the most organized empire of antiquity, suddenly gained even a handful of true machine guns? Would it become truly unstoppable? Or would that kind of power corrupt and ultimately destroy the very thing that made Rome great? We're not handing machine guns to every legionary. That would be chaos and boring. Instead, imagine this. Around 27 BC, shortly after Actium, Augustus gains control of a small, tightly guarded imperial arsenal, a few functioning machine guns, enough ammunition to matter, enough secrecy to keep the technology rare and political. This is the perfect moment. Augustus has just created a professional imperial army loyal first to the emperor, not to individual generals. He has the roads, the forts, the engineers, and the command structure to use such weapons effectively. Augustus's military settlement reduced the civil war armies to 28 legions and paired them with roughly the same number of auxiliaries, while Rome's wider military system rested on roads, camps, forts, and disciplined movement. Britannica notes that the Romans built roughly 50,000 miles of hard-surfaced roads, most of them for military movement, and their legions could construct forts, bridges, and camps with astonishing speed. So here is our divergence. At the birth of the Roman Empire, a tiny number of rapid-fire weapons enter the hands of the emperor alone. Not enough to industrialize Rome, but more than enough to rewrite history. The first battles are apocalyptic. Germanic warbands, Dacian hordes, or Parthian cavalry still fight the old way. Massed charges, shield walls, courage, and numbers. Then they meet the thunder. One machine gun, protected behind a Roman rampart or fortress wall, can tear apart whole front ranks in seconds. Cavalry charges turn into slaughter. Tight formations become graves. Heroic individual combat becomes suicide. Modern machine guns are designed for sustained rapid fire at roughly 500 to 1,000 rounds per minute. On an ancient battlefield, that kind of rate of fire would be incomprehensible. To the enemy, it doesn't feel like better tactics. It feels supernatural, like the gods themselves have sided with Rome. Rome would not just look stronger, it would look untouchable. Entire tribes might surrender after a single demonstration, convinced that resistance is pointless against divine wrath. Machine guns turn Rome's greatest strength, its engineering and logistics, into something nightmarish. A handful of weapons placed in key forts along the Rhine, the Danube, or mountain passes in the Alps make those borders almost impossible to breach. Bridges, narrow valleys, river crossings, all become kill zones. Roman roads allow rapid reinforcement. Roman engineers build perfect firing positions. Roman discipline keeps the weapons protected and supplied. The frontier stops being a line to defend. It becomes a trap that waits for anyone foolish enough to attack. That is what makes this scenario so dangerous. Rome already knew how to fortify space, move armies, and hold choke points. Machine guns do not replace that system. They multiply it. Conquest suddenly feels cheap. Rebellions are crushed in weeks instead of years. Client kings submit faster. Neighboring powers think twice before testing Rome. Caesar had conquered Gaul without any overwhelming technological edge over his enemies. Now imagine the same Roman command culture, the same discipline, the same logistical machine, but with a tiny monopoly on industrial-scale killing. For a while, it looks like Rome has solved the eternal imperial problem: how to make resistance feel hopeless. But easy victories always carry a hidden cost. Whoever controls the machine guns controls terror itself. Augustus already centralized power around the emperor and the Praetorian Guard. Add rapid-fire weapons to that structure, and internal dissent becomes far more dangerous to express. Urban riots in Rome, provincial revolts, even senatorial plots. All can be ended with terrifying efficiency. The empire becomes safer from rebellion. and far more oppressive to live in. Augustus' settlement did not abolish Roman institutions, but it concentrated real military power around the emperor in a way that made armed force central to political survival. Machine guns solve the problem of winning battles. They do nothing to solve the problem of ruling what you've won. If Rome expands too quickly into hostile territories, deeper into Germania, further east against the Parthians, or south into new African kingdoms, it may absorb more land than it can truly Romanize. The edges of the empire grow harder and more violent, while the core becomes stretched thin. Victory becomes easier, governance does not. This is the trap of the whole scenario. A weapon can cheapen conquest without making administration any easier. Rome's roads and army made expansion possible, but holding an empire still required local elites, taxation, supply, law, and time. And here is the darkest twist. Rome's greatest historical weakness was never just the barbarian outside the gates. It was the rival general inside the system. Now imagine a Roman civil war with machine guns. A usurper seizes an arsenal. A Praetorian faction storms the forum with rapid fire. An emperor turns the weapons on the streets of Rome itself. Succession crises, already bloody, become massacres. The same technology that made the frontiers unbreakable could make Roman politics lethally unstable. The empire doesn't grow weak, it becomes too deadly to fail gracefully. That is the real danger of giving extreme military asymmetry to a system that already had recurring struggles over succession, loyalty, and armed legitimacy. Would machine guns have made Rome stronger? Yes, dramatically so on the battlefield, harder to invade, faster at crushing resistance, more dominant than it already was. A Roman military system built on roads, forts, professional troops, and command discipline would become terrifyingly effective if even a few rapid-fire weapons were added to it. But that power would come at a steep price. Rome would likely become more absolute, more centralized, and more repressive. It might expand further than it could safely govern. And once those weapons entered internal Roman politics, every power struggle could turn into a bloodbath. In the end, machine guns wouldn't make Rome eternal. They would make it more terrifying, both to its enemies and to its own people. Give the most organized empire in antiquity the firepower of the industrial age, and you don't just change war. You change the very nature of empire itself, and you may accelerate its darkest tendencies instead of saving it from decline. So the final answer is not Rome wins forever. It's more unsettling than that. Rome probably becomes harder to conquer and harder to survive from within. So what do you think? Would machine guns have made Rome last longer? Or simply made its eventual fall even more brutal and bloody? Would the empire have become truly unstoppable? Or would the weapons have destroyed it from within? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me, what wild what-if scenario should we tackle next?